let's get started. So I'd just like to extend a big welcome to everyone today to our panel discussion on best of breed successful test automation practices from innovative brands. I want to extend a massive thank you to the Applitools team and Kanika Pandey for sharing our vision that our amazing testing community deserve more fun events in the calendar to learn, share, and have fun. Bringing this webinar to fruition has truly been a partnership effort between Applitools and Testing Talks. We are super excited to welcome our panelists for today, Angie Jones from Applitools, Theresa Neate from REA Real Estate, Karen Mangio from National Australia Bank, and Amrit from Origin Energy. I'm also personally pumped to be joining this amazing group of industry-leading testers and as a panelist for today. We have been super humbled by the amazing response from our community for this and other events like Testing Talks Conference and Tasty Testing Talks. As an active and hands-on tester, those who know me know how much I love our industry, our community, and the field of testing and test automation. So having more events like this to come together are literally days in the calendar I look forward to with excitement. Another Christmas day for me, so for that, I thank you. Which leads me to thanking my fellow organizer team at Testing Talks, Aswin Gola and Leon Vessel, who are not just amazing organizers, but incredible testers, who I have the pleasure to work with every day. I hired both these guys into Tabcorp, and it's people like them with their passion for testing and raw talent that make me jump out of bed every single day to go to work and push the boundaries of what we can achieve as testers for our teams at Tabcorp. A big part of why we established Testing Talks was to create fun and amazing events with our incredible testing community, with incredible testers as speakers, incredible prizes, innovative sponsors, fun games, incredible catering, and awesome activities. With the current pandemic, this has made running such events tough, but we hope Testing Talks Online can fill the gap until we come back together in the new year, bigger and better than ever before. We have come up with a fun game today called the Testing Talks Online game. Addie will share the link to the website right now in chat in the webinar. We encourage all those listening to head to testingtalks.com and navigate to Testing Talks Online and click the purple play game button to get involved. Thanks to our platinum partner Applitools and our gold partner Headspin for supplying the awesome prizes, a $200 gift card for Amazon and a JBL wireless speaker. We will be drawing these prizes for the highest scorers picked at random at the conclusion of the webinar. That's testingtalks.com, then navigate to Testing Talks Online and click the purple play button. Without further ado, I would like to now hand over to Angie Jones, who will be kicking off our panel discussion today. If you have any questions, please note, we will be taking questions at the end of the panel discussion before the prize draw. Enjoy, everyone, and thanks again for joining us today and making this all possible. Angie?
Hello, thanks so much, Cameron. Hi, everyone. So glad that you could join us tonight. I'm Angie, automation architect at Applitools, and one of the things I love most about my role is that I travel all over the world when we're not on lockdown, meeting and consulting with engineering teams and discussing challenges that they face. And one thing that I have realized about building quality software is that the struggle is real. Everyone is trying to figure out how to rapidly produce software that is yet of high quality. So I had the idea to gather best practices from some of the top companies in software, financial services, healthcare, gaming, and entertainment verticals. And that's what I would like to share with you today, what the elite development teams are doing. And I am joined by this wonderful panel of experts. Hold on, my mouse is acting crazy. I'm joined by this wonderful panel of experts who are also in the industry, and they'll provide some colorful commentary on this research and offer their perspective on these topics as well. Okay, so let's jump right in. For starters, the research showed that 100% of the companies employ automated tests to expedite their release cycles. When the goal is to release software on a continuous cycle, test automation is a must-have. There simply isn't enough time to manually test every new feature, as well as manually execute regression tests to make sure existing functionality isn't broken. So these teams invest an extensive amount of effort into automating their tests so that they're confident in their product each time they go to deploy. Now, I know from personal experience how difficult it is for developers to find the time to write tests, and also how difficult it is to have the test teams to write the code to automate tests. So I inquired about this a bit more to determine how are these teams overcoming these challenges. And every single one of these companies have their developers involved in writing the test. And most of them said that their developers take care of the unit tests while the QA team is responsible for writing the integration and the end-to-end tests. So a whopping 60% of the team shared that they no longer have the distinction between development and QA engineers. And instead they have hybrid engineers. So their goal here is to have developers own all of the testing of their code, as well as the triaging and the maintenance of those tests. And what they discovered is what I already know is that developers, sorry if there are any developers on the call, but developers aren't the best at this. There's not much time, and frankly, not much interest from developers to go beyond writing their unit tests. So many of these teams have had to bring in quality experts to help out. So, what does a quality expert do in these situations? Based on the feedback from these companies, they said that they have them to write test infrastructure. So, the coaches or the advocates will find the best testing libraries. They create the test automation code base and all of the utility functionality that the developers will need to write their tests. That way, it's not such an overhead for the developers, and they can just focus on cranking their tests out. Another task that the quality advocates have is to coach the developers. So many of the computer science and boot camp programs that graduated your developers didn't necessarily teach them how to test, unfortunately. So this is a huge hurdle for developers who may have good intentions and actually want to test their code. And they may never share this with you, but a lot of them simply don't know how to test, and they've told me this on in private. They've told me this sometimes on Twitter. I'm not sure if they're actually telling their team members this, but the quality advocates specialize in this stuff, right? So they can help them think of scenarios as well as teach them how to write good tests. And if you think that this may be a problem for your developers and you don't have a quality advocate just yet, then we do have Test Automation University, which is an online learning platform that we sponsor at Applitools, which provides these free courses on this very thing. All right. Another task for the advocates, they help develop the testing strategies for the team. So they help them assess risk and come up with a plan of attack on what should be tested and how thoroughly. They also have a big picture view, which is greatly needed because your developers are zoned in on their features in their tests. Now, I've worked as a developer before. Even now, I work on side projects as a developer. So you all may know me as the automation and testing person. You would be very disappointed in me if you saw how I operate when I'm actually building features myself. It's just a totally different mindset. And I'm so focused, as many developers are, on getting the feature to work. And it's not easy. And all of my time and energy is spent there that I just unfortunately have I have limited resources when it comes to testing my work, and so I empathize with developers there. They also the advocates, they consider like how these features interact with one another, so that more sophisticated tests can be developed. And then someone needs to strategize on which tests automatically run, giving, certain pull requests. These advocates also help the test suites remain relevant by pruning out tests that are no longer of high business value. So let me open this up now to the panel. And what do you all see as far as automation strategies, developers pitching in to help test? How is that going? Do you see anyone 100% development team owning quality, or is assistance needed?
I can take
Theresa
that.
here. So at REA Group in Melbourne, we have mostly developers writing tests.
So that everyone knows who you are.
I'm Theresa Neate. I'm a QA practice lead or a quality manager, really is my formal title, but I'm the person who looks after quality as a practice in REA Group's consumer-facing group. And consumer is the app that you and I use when we seek houses, when we look for residential places to live. That is consumer. So that's literally the web app and the mobile app that you would be using if you're looking for a home. So I'll just grab that answer quickly. What we do at REA Group is we have mostly developers writing the tests. But as Angie mentions, the QAs, who we call quality analysts, not assurance, they look after the strategy, the coverage, the coaching. They are sometimes involved in the test infrastructure, but not that frequent. But they definitely have the higher level view that they help them, the developers implement, and there's quite a bit of pairing occurring between QAs and devs throughout the life cycle of any feature.
Very nice. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Hi.
Sorry, we do need to. Amrit, you can go ahead. That's fine.
Yeah. Hi guys. I'm Amrit from Origin Energy. So we sell electricity and gas plants to our customers. So we have an app for that, and also we have a website. I would probably say that I'm more aligned to what Angie mentioned about quality advocates, and it's more or less we are more aligned to what was mentioned in the slide. So in our team, both development and the quality practice team, they are involved in the setting of the framework, writing automation, and they actively contribute to the entire testing practice. And as a result of this, what we believe is we have gotten quite good feedback and faster feedback into our development cycle, and that has actually made our release process quite fast and effective.
Great. Karen?
Yep, I'm Karen. I'm the quality manager in the mobile space at the National Australia Bank. Pretty much in our area, it's a hybrid pretty much of both, right? So we have developers that are doing unit component UI tests, and then you have the QEs that are pretty much pairing up with them, making sure that they have the right coverage on those earlier phases. And then we just take on pretty much what we feel is like, integration, which is more like a functional flow. And I think what we would like to build in our area really now is the focus on shift left. We started out with devs doing their own thing, QEs doing their own thing, but now we're really right smack on that journey of shifting quite a bit of those tests. The idea is to train the developers, pretty much what Andrew is saying. What we would like to get at is to get a hybrid, right? The very elusive dev QA, where you have developers that knows how to test, and you have QEs that also can read code, can contribute, maybe fix small defects here and there. So that would be, that's our current journey. And I think we are getting there in a lot of sense. We're starting to minimize quite a bit of the tests on the right.
Excellent, excellent, great. Okay, we wanted to make sure that what we were talking about was more than just unit tests here. So I inquired about which tests the companies automated. And oh, heads up, I forgot to tell you all this, but the companies, they only spoke to me under the order that I would not share their identities and, you know, associate their practices with their company name. So I'm unable to tell you who these companies are, but know that I do know for a fact, like, you know, what they're doing has been successful, and the data is correct. All right. Okay. So yeah, so I asked them about the unit tests and if they were doing more than just these. And every one of the companies, they said they automated their unit, their web, and their API tests. 80% of the ones with mobile apps automated their mobile tests, and 80% of the companies had reusable web components, like, you know, the ones that you see in Storybook, for example, and they automated tests for those as well. However, there was very little effort by the core development teams to automate the non-functional tests. So areas like security and accessibility testing were mostly handled by separate groups, like Center of Excellences that were dedicated to those particular areas. So I'm going to open this up to the panel again. Do you see, like, teams that you work with or others that you know in the industry that are automating beyond just the unit or the integration test, but maybe also including things like API and mobile, or how are they handling their non-functional automated tests as well?
Yep, Karen here, for mobile. For us, I think we're fortunate enough that we are also building microservices in our area. So we are automating quite a lot of our tests on the lower stack, which is all on the microservices, and anything that really is UI specific, they're the only ones that we test from the UI. The other thing that we also are in the process of automating is accessibility. We are a very automation first joint, and as everyone can appreciate, accessibility is quite manual. And we need to also make sure that not only that we do progression testing, but also regression. You can just imagine making sure that, you know, the app is accessible to everybody, not just the features that you're rolling out, but also the current features, because that could be a massive task. So we've started getting into the automation of certain things. There are certain things that can be easily automated, like large texts. We use Apply tools for that. We're also starting to look at other avenues that we're working through right now. So yeah, it's really not just the unit component and the integration flows. There's quite a bit of stuff that we are automating.
That's amazing. And Karen, you're probably your team. I've been to Australia and met with your team, and I was really impressed with what you all were doing with accessibility testing. I look to you all as one of the forefront leaders in that area, so that's pretty cool. Theresa?
Yeah, this is a really good topic to discuss because security performance, or the quote unquote non-functional features, are also really part of the behavior. And in our case, what we have done is we've shifted left completely, but we haven't automated security and performance yet. So we built it in from the beginning. Because my role is called quality, thankfully not QA, I have a wider remit, so I get to look at security and performance. And I also report on some of the risks, and that's something that I'd like to build into the automated suite after we've had some maturity built in. But certainly we are building it into the requirements up front, which I think is a good start.
Excellent. Great. Okay. We
Hey guys,
did.
Angie, can I just
Go
jump
ahead.
in, Paul?
Yes. Yeah. Go ahead. Who's this?
Yeah,
Amrit?
that's Cameron Bradley.
Oh, Cameron. Hi, Cameron.
Hey guys, so just on this one, and also addressing a bit of the previous point, you know, we're massive fans at Tabcorp of this idea of dev and test working together, this idea of like a hand-in-hand culture. We've also tried to throw away titles a bit as well, like not in a conventional sense or a cliche way, but just to say, you know, QAs are multi-role. So, you know, our QAs should be able to do a mixture of automation, manual, and exploratory testing. And also, as Theresa and Angie kind of pointed to, the idea of being a quality coach, you know, empowering their developers, making them better, making the team better. In light of that, and drawing into this current kind of discussion point, we've really pioneered something we call cross-platform testing. It's pretty cool. So we trialed it in actually our Kino project. It's unique, this project, because it's quite lean. So basically every team, so whether it be web, iOS, Android, or API, basically operates in a small squad. So you've effectively got one tester and 2 developers per squad. And we were operating like this for about 6 months to a year, and each QA was kind of doing their Android or doing their iOS testing, working hand in hand with the developers, adding tests together. And then we had this idea of why aren't they working across platform? Like, why do we have this idea that, you know, you have to be an Android tester or an iOS tester or a web tester or an API tester? I mentioned them in the introduction, but Aswin and Leon, the fellow organisers of testing talks, they were real pioneers for this. They effectively let their guard down, threw away their, you know, belief of what they should be testing day in, day out, or what they're most passionate about, and said, hey, let's try test across platform. And now they are, you know, a year later, they're working across all platforms. They're able to automate across all technologies, whether it be Protractor, XCUI test, Espresso, Calabash. These guys work hand in hand together to build that culture within the team, and you know, they're better for it. And from my perspective, I think it helps retain them as well, because you know, they don't know what they're going to get every day. They're learning multiple technologies, they're working across multiple teams, and also there's no blockers if one of them's away for a day. So we're really passionate about that approach to testing and the way we automate.
That's amazing. I often joke about, like, when people need to focus on testing, it like requires a deeper skill set than developing the code almost. You know, you have to know all of these different frameworks and all of these languages and things. And we rise to the occasion. So that's amazing. That's amazing. Amrit, do you have anything you want to say here?
Yeah, just to it's interesting to say what Cam just mentioned. We have a similar approach in our quality practice team. We tend to do everything that needs to be done as a part of testing. And as a matter of fact, looking at the slide that is currently being shown, we have performance test as a part of our pipeline too. We automate that. So yeah, so it's all of this what is mentioned over here, and whatever Theresa and Cam mentioned, it's a practice that has been evolving, and I guess that's what is yeah, that'll help us deliver faster.
Excellent, excellent, great. Thank you all so much for the input here. That's a great topic. Now let's get into languages. This is one of my favorite topics. I did some research last year on what are the top programming languages used in test automation. So this included all sorts of companies, not just the mature top dogs from my recent research, but the vast majority of the teams are using Java. So that was 44% of the respondents. And while JavaScript is definitely on the rise, this came in at number 2 for the overall research that I did, and was still only 15%. So quite a leap between the JavaScript and the Java. This was really interesting, especially compared to the recent research I used. So when talking to the top dog companies, all of them use JavaScript. I was shocked. Some have teams that use other languages in addition to JavaScript for things like native mobile testing and APIs, but for their web apps, they're using JavaScript. So I inquired why this is, and they explained that their web developers are JavaScript programmers, right? And so some companies even said they had legacy test frameworks built in other languages, and their developers just simply wouldn't touch it. And when they switched to JavaScript, then the developers became more engaged. So I'm really curious to hear from the panel on this point. What are you seeing? What are you using? Do you find if you're coding in a different language than the one that your developers specialize in, do they still engage, or do you have to accommodate to what they're familiar with?
Hey, Angie, I'll go on that. It was in the last couple of years, we actually had to evolve our testing framework, and specifically with regards to the technology we've been using. So when we started our total quality practice, they were all Java developers and were Groovy experts. So we set up our framework in Groovy for testing. And what we actually found out, and it was interesting, what it clearly reflects what you said, is because we had most of our developers, front-end developers, and they were using TypeScript, which is a wrapper on JavaScript, to do the development, and they were not quite familiar with Java. It was a challenge at that time to actually get the developers' involvement in writing test automation and whatnot. Even though they wanted to write, they were facing a challenge to actually understand how they're written, what the framework is, how it works. And so we gradually had to, I started coaching them to start learning Groovy and Java. But at some point, we made a conscious decision and moved to more of a JavaScript-based framework. And once we switched, we got an amazing outcome that the developers started contributing so much to the automation. It was just phenomenal.
Wow. Theresa?
This is a really good topic because it sort of implies the connection between test automation and developers. And I completely agree that the developers should be very involved in choosing the frameworks. But when we talk about languages, you really want the language that you are working in and make that work. And I was just looking at our GitHub here, and our top languages currently, from what I can see in our space, is Ruby, JavaScript, Scala. We're a big functional programming house, so Scala is featuring very heavily. And if you ask a Scala developer, they'll tell you that Scala doesn't need testing, but they'll always say that with a half smile because they know we'll challenge them. And then we have quite a bit of Java left as well, but Java is being replaced a little bit by Kotlin. So we try to automate anything using the language that the feature or the functionality is written in. We don't try and bring something on top of it and abstract it any further than that.
Interesting. Anyone else? Cameron or Karen?
Yeah, with us with mobile in NAB, we predominantly use Appium and Java, right? But we have started. Look, the main reason for that is it's the skill set that the current team that we had at the time had, right? And now we're more starting to train them around using the same tools that our developers are using, which is XCUI and Espresso. And as part of our shift to the left, I think that will only work if they talk the same and use the same tools, right? So I'm not saying that it doesn't, because really at the end of the day is making sure that you have the right coverage in the right area, and minimal duplication, if no duplication. So yeah, that's just what I was going to add.
Nice, nice.
Hey,
Okay.
so one of the big things that we've been on this massive journey at Tabcorp from a technology perspective. I mean, you know, in my time at Tabcorp alone, we've kind of grown from what was, I guess, 6 projects in our portfolio to around 24 to 26 today. One of the biggest decisions as part of that, especially from my perspective being the QA practice lead, was to ensure that we were, I guess, having innovative and new technology for our automation, but having the right technology and tooling across the board. So I actually took it kind of out of testing and to the actual delivery leads into the project in the early days, and had these discussions about the importance of maintaining a consistent technology in the actual system stacks moving forward. So at the time, we had a few Angular 1 projects. We had a few Java projects. And what we did as a team, we just kind of worked together to gear it towards a single technology. So, for example, in web, 16 of those projects are now JavaScript based. Some are now moving towards TypeScript, but generally speaking, they're JavaScript projects. So you've got Angular, you've got React, and you've even got Aurelia up in the lotteries. This has been incredible, and the reason it's been incredible is it's allowed us to use similar technology for our automation across the board. And that's why we came up with our idea for a common automation framework approach. So this is specifically for web and mobile. It's basically the idea of having one common framework that multiple technology members contribute to, both dev and test. At present, we currently have about 120 people working on this common framework approach. It's fully open source, so it's open source and available to the community. Our common framework has actually been downloaded about 20,000 times by the open source community.
Wow.
Realistically, that's not 20,000 people that are using our framework. Like many testers and developers, they're getting our framework and pulling out some of the great steps, assumingly. We have had a couple of projects at ANZ actually use the common framework, which is pretty cool as well. But what I'm really trying to stress with this point is the importance of a consistent framework, a consistent common framework, because what it means is that, you know, instead of having, you know, one automation engineer or even, you know, working as dev and test, working in one single project, developing one framework, you know, their contributions are actually helping multiple projects. You've got a whole team working on something, everyone looking in on it. And that's a big part of the reason why now we do have the 16 projects all running on one common automation framework. So when someone says, you know, across those 24 projects, Cam, how many automation frameworks do you have? Well, we can say we've got about 5 frameworks. And that's a big part of our success and the reason why we've got over 3,000 end-to-end automation tests running in those frameworks. It's also why we've had the developers buy in, because, you know, we didn't use some tool, we didn't use QTP. We developed this from scratch using open source technologies. It's simply Cucumber with Protractor and TypeScript underneath. And it's that approach that has led to our success there. Thanks, Angie.
Very interesting. Thank you, Cameron. Okay. So for web automation, let's talk about tools now. Cypress had the most adoption with 60%. This was also very surprising to me. Followed by Selenium and WebDriver IO with almost 40%. And a tiny percentage use their own in-house libraries. These were mostly seen by the gaming companies. Mobile was split evenly across Appium and the native tools Espresso and Android, Espresso for Android and Apple's XCUI test for iOS. And then Applitools was used by all of the top dog companies for their visual testing. And 60% use it for their component tests. So none of the teams are using a co-list, record, and playback approach, which is not really surprising considering their developers are writing the code. So I know like you all touched on this a little bit, but let's get a little deeper here in talking about the different tools. So which tools are you using for your automation?
I'll start with mobile. I think we called it out before. So we've got Appium, XCUI test, and Espresso. So XCUI test and Espresso, they're the ones that we use for our UI UI tests, and then Appium is more of the the integration and the navigation screen to screen. We also use Applitools very, very earlier on as part of those testing in XCUI and Espresso, because it does help us identify but impacts, if they change anything with any of the gel components and it does actually impact some other screens, it's very, very easy to identify that pretty quickly. So yeah, I think it's pretty spot on for us for mobile.
And for web, you said you were using Appium?
I don't deal with web.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay. What about you, Amrit?
For web, we started with JEP, which is a wrapper on Selenium. And then it's been like 6 months that we have switched to something called Test Cafe.
Yeah.
And
how are you liking Test Cafe, Amrit?
It's amazing. We actually intended to switch to Cypress because that is from the different proof of concepts we ran, that was the best. But we had to support cross browser, and that's why we had to go with Test Cafe. And it's just amazing. Really supports parallel execution of tests, which brings our build time really low. For our mobile testing, we use Appium, and we for screenshot testing, obviously we use Applitools, mostly to test the components at the component layer.
Okay, and Theresa?
We gave our teams a lot of autonomy to choose what they want to use, and this has somewhat backfired on us, because now we have last count was about 50 squads, so 50 different teams doing what's best for them. And as we are growing as a company, we are bringing some of that more centralized, and we are normalizing some of the practices and the tools. So I went and asked the company, my current remit is about 14 squads, but I asked the entire company what they're working on. Cypress features very heavily, and XCUI for mobile, for iOS, and also Kotlin. But the thing that some teams do and some teams don't is contract testing. So we do use Pact quite a bit, depending on your interfacing clients, depending on who is using your API or your services. And then the thing that I want to mention also regarding non-functional testing, which we touched on earlier, is that we use a tool called Testable.io, which we automate some of, and we try and put that into the CI build so that we get continuous feedback. And that's more or less where we're at, but we do have a wide variety of practices and tools being used, and we think this is where we'll land, and maybe as a central location.
Interesting. And Cameron, how about you?
Hey, I mean, so broadly across the stack, basically looking at, as I said, on web, we're basically Cucumber on top of Protractor, on top of TypeScript. For iOS and Android, we've got a bit of a mixture of Calabash, as well as XCUI Test and Espresso. And then in our core systems, we've got some MS Test for our .NET systems that we inherited as part of the merger last year with Lotteries. The Aussies in the room will know what I'm talking about when I talk about the lot. And that's pretty much it. But an interesting story actually about our mobile automation was that unfortunately a business decision was made to do a wrapper app first for Keynote Android. Because of that, a lot of us wanted to use, we wanted to go down the route of Espresso, but as you know, it predominantly only works with native Android apps, at least works well. So we had to go down that Calabash path. And unfortunately, because of now, of course, they've realized that a wrapper app is not as competitive, as fast, and doesn't offer as many of the benefits as it does when you do it native. We've now had to start refactoring that Calabash suite over to Espresso. So it's an interesting point as well about, you know, making sure you get the tech stack right from the get-go. Otherwise, you're going to have to, you know, pay for it later.
Yeah.
Totally agree with Cam. Totally agree.
Great. Okay. So it's really interesting to see such a high percentage of these companies using Cypress, as I mentioned. Considering until like a couple of months ago, it only supported Chrome. So we heard um, Amrit say how they didn't go with Cypress because they needed to do cross-platform support. So we asked the companies about their strategy when it comes to testing across multiple browsers, multiple viewport sizes. A few said that they no longer do it, citing things like flakiness and wasted time and effort. Um, Also, they cited lack of browser diversity, say that, many are using Chromium, and so it's not much different. However, the others use device farms from cloud providers, and many are using Applitude's new ultra fast grid as well. So, curious panel, what are you seeing as far as your cross platform testing? Is this something that you still find important? I know Amrit does. And if so, are you getting a good return on your investment with your strategy? Let's start with Amrit since he mentioned it earlier.
Thanks, Angie. Absolutely. So yeah, that's cross-browser and cross-platform testing has been a big challenge, and we have been evolving our test strategy since the last 2 years. And I was lucky enough to get Applitools on board, and with the ultra-fast grid, it's just it works like a magic. So we've started evolving our cross-platform testing. We used some of the tools, the cross-browser testing tools in the past. It worked. It did its work, but there were some technical challenges because of the locations where they were in, the data centers they were in. So we were facing a lot of flakiness, and it was a lot of time and money wasted over there. So we changed most of our cross-platform functional testing from cross-browser testing into mostly doing screenshot testing, and that gives us the most benefit that we wanted.
Nice. Very good. Karen, how about you?
Yep, in the mobile space, we do need to make sure, given that, we're a financial institution, we do need to make sure that, we're a lot more risk averse in terms of making sure that we have enough breadth in terms of what devices and operating system we support. So we do have a quarterly check with our business team to make sure that we check what our users are using in production, right? We pretty much said 20 devices for iOS and 20 devices with different varying operating systems as well on Android. So we use Perfecto to do all of that cross-platform. Are we getting the benefit of that? Yeah, absolutely, because it's quite easy for us when we go in the App Store and we check, this feature isn't working, or they're having issues with that. The first thing that we check is, did our test run on those OSs and devices? And the beauty of constantly checking what our user base are using is definitely helping us a lot, because we make sure that at least 90% is covered in there. So over and above that, we also, like what I said, with the automation that we're trying to do for large text for accessibility, we've used Applitools, and that one we did do a risk-based approach, because we cannot have like baselines for all of those devices, right? So given that if it's a manual effort, they would only test one device on the most recent operating system. Now we're up to like at least having 3 Androids and 3 iOS. So yeah, that's pretty much us.
Nice. Cameron, what about you?
Oh, this is one of those areas where we're definitely facing challenges, because I mean, some of the people here probably understand this, but working for a big corporate, sometimes getting investment for these types of endeavors can be tricky. Putting a business case together and actually getting that approved. We definitely see the merit in it, and we obviously have a general approach to cross-platform testing when it comes to checking on different devices, validating our web automation on different browsers, be it Firefox and Safari. But as far as actually investing in, I guess, external platforms of Tabcorp to actually do this job, we definitely are struggling at the moment.
I like how real you are there, Cameron, because that's what most of us are doing, you know, struggling and trying to figure out, you know, how to get there. So thank you for that. Theresa?
Yeah, it's a hot topic with us because we are we're so consumer facing. We have a very unit testing based framework. So we're very much a test pyramid kind of company, and we do a lot of CI, and we do, in some cases, I know you're going to touch on this later, but we do also continuous deployment and delivery. So in many cases, we don't actually do cross-platform testing, we just deploy. And of course, this has its pros and its cons. And we have recently researched, and I'm still researching options. And I'm not necessarily going to choose a vendor just because it's something that they promote as a solving all problems. So similar to Cameron, we're not struggling. We are still seeking answers for the best and the most efficient way of testing, so that as the test pyramid guides us, we do a minimum amount of UI testing, and if that comes to cross-platform testing, a minimum amount of that. So we might even do AWS device farm, we might do Smart Bear, we do a little bit of browser stack at the moment, but we're still in the process of deciding what's right for us.
Gotcha. Fair. Okay, thank you. Now, all of the elite teams that I spoke with are practicing continuous integration or continuous deployment. So this enables their team to release features to their users faster. And again, test automation is a key enabler for this. But none of the teams have a set and go type of process. So they aren't running their thousands of tests on every pull request, for example. They're using more sophisticated practices to execute the tests which are related to the area that's being modified, which I thought was pretty mature. So some of the practices that were cited were tagging the test by feature area. So, for example, if a shopping cart feature is checked in, then all of the tests that are marked as shopping cart are executed. They also use code coverage tools and try to map between the test and the source code. And then the rest of the tests are still executed, but are done so periodically throughout the day. So, for example, maybe every 3 hours or so. The vast majority of the elite companies we spoke with were using Jenkins for this purpose. And they did mention a few one off teams in their companies are using other tools like AWS, TeamCity, Kubernetes, Google Cloud. So, are you all practicing CI or CD? And if so, how do you determine like which tests are run? Do you run them all at every pull request, or do you have a more sophisticated model for doing this? And also, which tools are you using? Sorry, loaded question.
Hi.
Cameron, go ahead. Oh, Amrit, go ahead. Go ahead, Amrit.
Yeah. So we have different levels of testing, and we also try to adhere to the testing pyramid. We tend to run most of the UI tests at the component level in the pipeline. However, UI tests are usually time consuming, so we have tried to parallelize them and run them in containers. in parallel, but still they're time consuming. So at that point, what we do is we actually tag certain tests to run not on every PR, but so tag certain tests to run on every PR, and periodically run all the tests in the CI.
Nice. Theresa?
Yes, we have gone on board in full. So all our services are currently being continuously integrated through the Australian startup BuildKite. And we run literally all our APIs, web, UI, mobile tests, everything we do is currently being used with BuildKite. Previously, we were a little bit of Bamboo. We had some really old services in the past, but BuildKite is currently what we're working with, and we are very, very pleased with it.
Nice. Karen?
Yep. For us, I think over and above what the guys said, with the developers, right, at the start, once they check in the code, they do have their own feature branches that they run, and they select certain features that they think are impacted as well, right? So once that comes through, then it comes to us where we start also above and beyond the tests that they do. We also have extended sanity, which is where we start executing through the devices. That's via Perfecto. And as Amrit rightfully mentioned, because it takes so long, that we don't execute them at pull request, we execute them at night. So at the end of the business day, or we have a job that gets executed, it runs all of our regression suite. It also runs our ALI, which is accessibility, large text. We also have tests around different personas, which is something that Perfecto offers. It's pretty much just testing, making sure that, you know, a small core test, that if, let's say, you have a persona where you have a device that is running on 4G, and, you know, some apps running in the background, as opposed to a device that's running low coverage, it's really just making sure that the app still functionally works. And then at the end of the night, we have a releasable build that we can potentially use for, if we want to have like a hot fix or anything like that, we have that, because we've got all of those tests running at night, and then we go through it in the morning.
Very nice. Cameron?
Hey everyone, so I'm going to give a bit of history here, because there's a bit of a war story. So when I effectively started at Tabcorp, I actually started as a contractor, and I was brought in for a kind of new project the company were doing. It was really cool, innovative, especially for this company. And man, I'll tell you what, after that year, like, the success of that project effectively established the role of the QA practice lead, which is the role I'm doing now. So our success basically showed the company we needed that role, and we needed to develop QA as a practice, which is amazing. However, once I exited that little pod I'd been working in, that project where I had a whole bunch of consultants that kind of more or less knew what they were doing when it came to QA, I kind of got to see what was happening in the company elsewhere. And I'll always remember, it was probably my first day in the official role of QA practice lead, that I walked into one of the projects. It was quite a legacy project, probably about 20 years old project. And the two testers were effectively sending automation tests to one another over email. And they didn't seem to see anything wrong with that. And so I sat down next to them, and I sort of worked out what they were doing and why they were doing it. And to be fair, they didn't know any better. And that's because they didn't have a practice. They weren't learning, they weren't skilling up. They basically learned a simple way in the early days and stuck with it. So we basically got together after that as a wider practice, including everyone. Like, we got the project managers, the delivery leads, the business analysts, the developers, and we just said, this is the state we're at. And we patented a line there that's led to a lot of success, which is, quote, if it's not in CI, it does not count. And by having that quote across the business, it led to a lot of successes. Why? Because it meant that we had to have good automation developed in the projects committed as part of the way we work on pull request in CI, which we use BuildKite across the board now. When I walked in, it was a mixture of Bamboo, Travis. We pretty much had a bit of everything. As far as automation goes, you know, you've heard about the numbers there and kind of what we've pulled off across projects, but the way we do it is we basically have moved to a culture of mocking to enable us to have such large automation suites that run consistently and are able to test so much. So we effectively have a smoke test, an acceptance and a regression suite run that runs on a pull request. And then we basically have a regression suite that runs on schedule in the environment, because as we all know, there's a lot of environment-based bugs that simply won't show up when you're running your automation on a mock server. And to further complement that, we've really spanned into the idea of tagging our tests, so tagging it for different purposes. You know, you might have tests that run on at tablet or at mobile or at desktop. And for web tests, you know, they're going to run in a variety of emulators. They're going to run on different resolutions, and they're going to pick up those bugs that you can't usually spot. You know, another area there that we've really gone into in CI and really actually pumped the way we do CI and pushed us into areas like Docker and building new agents on the fly in AWS is, you know, pushing for that innovation in our automation as well. E.g., when we looked at doing screenshot-based automation, we used open source for that, and you know, by doing that, it really pushed our CI up as well.
Very nice. Very, very nice. Okay, another cool technique, and this is the last of the research. A lot of the top dogs are using feature flagging. And this allows them to push to production, but hide the feature from their customers. And with this in place, they're finding they can do a more thorough job of testing the features, right? Or even releasing it to like a small subset of their customers and then monitoring to see if there are any issues. So some other benefits cited were the ability to deploy faster, as they didn't have to wait for other dependent components in order to be done here. Are you all using feature flagging? And if so, have you found it beneficial?
Yep, I can start off with that one. Yes, we do use feature flagging because, rightfully mentioned, Angie, is we do have dependency on microservices that are not built by our platform or some backend changes. So it actually enables us to ensure that, you know, within a release, we have multiple projects playing in that release as well, just to make sure that we don't stop the entire release, that we switch those ones off, those specific features off. So the other thing that we're using feature toggles for is certain nins, like, you know, so let's say like certain people only. We target specific people for, let's say, if you want to do early sort of testing. We also can do, as part of risk mitigation, a percentage rollout. We actually can do that too. And specific OS version, let's say that you have a known problem because an SDK isn't compatible with certain things, and we can pretty much just say, okay, so for this app release, we are going to toggle certain operating systems. So even at device level. So it's very, very beneficial because it gives us a lot of flexibility to make sure that we can release, like in the same cadence that we have. Within our team, we have a fortnightly cadence in terms of release. So we make the business make that decision whether do they want to release monthly or do they want to release every fortnight. So it enables us to do that.
Nice, very nice. Anyone else?
Yeah, we do use feature flags to release a lot of features. We have been doing multiple deployments in a day. So the max number of deployments we did in a day was 40 into prod. And we could only do that because quite a few of the deployments were dark deploy, as in the feature was toggled off. And then we just toggled it on for a cohort of customers just to see how it is adopted. And Yeah, that's one thing we've been doing. From a test automation perspective, I just wanted to highlight that for features that are mostly targeted for a subset of the cohort, like I don't know, for 10 or 100 or 200 customers, we do not, from an automation perspective, we do not write a lot of automation around it, and try to keep it light. Just write a few visual tests, test it on a handful of devices, and whatnot. It's just because we are at that point, we are not sure whether that feature is going to be adopted by the customer or not. And once it is adopted and the business decides that, all right, we should do a big bang release, then we just add on flesh to the bone at that point.
Great. Okay, so that completes the research. There you have it, best practices from innovative brands. What questions do you all have? We would love to answer those for you.
So yeah, we do have a lot of questions from the audience, and we'll try to see how many we get. So first one, in my organization, test automation was originally implemented by the tech leads. When I joined as a test automation architect, I found it hard to get internal stakeholders to agree to change the tech stack and revamp testing processes. Has anyone faced this kind of situation, and how did you handle it?
Hey, Cameron.
I can. Yeah.
Oops, sorry,
Cameron.
Oh, thanks, mate. So, I mean, we had that problem. When the QA practice was originally established, like, no one took QA seriously. The majority of people there, especially the devs, the long-standing devs, saw QA as effectively the testers sitting in a corner, picking up a card, doing their testing, and putting it in the done column. So we had a big battle ahead of us that we were definitely up for. There was many ways that we kind of got to where we are, and I'd say at Tabcorp now we're probably the most visible part of the technology team. There's not many people that don't know who the QA practice is, what we're about, and what we're achieving. But I think that's the key right there. In the early days, I remember one of the biggest things that really put us on the map was doing a showcase, which to a lot of people here, you guys probably do showcases all the time. You have your sprint showcases. But at Tabcorp, this was unheard of. And I remember we'd done it basically our first sprint. It wasn't anything crazy, but basically what we'd done is we'd basically delivered our first feature, which was literally basically the app building and going to a page. But we'd added an automation test that effectively automated the page title, real simple stuff. We got that in CI and it was passing, and it was running on pull request, and it was deploying an artifact that we could actually build an application with. And we thought that was really cool for the first sprint. So we thought, you know what, let's do a showcase. And we sent this out to everyone. I remember I asked the head of digital at the time, can we have the email list for the whole tech team? We sent that bad boy out and we were pumped, ready to go. Well, we polished this up. This was a polished showcase. We practiced it. We were on fire. Like, there was passion in our eyes and fire in our voice, and we were ready to rock and roll. One person came to that showcase. Oh. But you know what? That one person that came was the head of digital. And he came and he saw it and he realized this wasn't just some showcase. This wasn't the consultants trying to show off how good they are. They are actually doing really cool stuff in a way that we've never done it at Tabcorp or in a project the way that these guys have done it. And what happened was that basically every single sprint, we started getting more and more people to those showcases. And after about 6 or 7 of those showcases, we were starting to get 30 or 40 people from across tech coming. And we had people in decision-making positions, the general managers coming along and saying, hey, this is one of the best parts of the week because you guys always come in so damn passionate and showing off some really cool stuff that you guys are doing. We took that and we pushed that into other initiatives that show what we're about. We started newsletters, we started doing reports, and every single achievement we were showing. And that's why we started getting investment. And that's why we were able to grow from 2 or 3 testers to the 20 QA practice team we have today. And we also grew from 6 projects in our portfolio to the 24 I mentioned earlier. Visibility, showing what you're doing, but ultimately producing real outcomes, that will help you achieve what you want.
Amazing.
Yeah, just to add to what Cam said, One thing I would like to recommend to the guy, to the person who actually asked this question is, if there's an existing framework, somebody has set it up and it's working, replacing it with another framework is not only time-consuming effort, but also it's expensive. So it's very important to, first of all, do things in bits. If you want to change technology, if you want to change the platform or the framework, first of all, you need to first and foremost thing, you have to bring everyone on the journey, rather than just trying to say that, all right, I have to implement this and whatnot. I'm just saying you from my experience. I did try that and I failed. But once you start bringing people on the journey, and make them understand why you're doing what you're doing, that makes things easier. And it's a gradual process. It's not a big bang change that you can make.
Yeah, that's so true. You don't want to be that person that comes and just wants to like throw everything that people have worked hard on out with the bathwater and just replace it because it's some new cool kid on the block type of tool, right? So you need to have some really good reason. And my experience has been a combination of both Amrit's and Cameron's, where there's been a case where I wanted to change what we were doing, and I had to have a little talk with myself. Like, Angie, is your reason legit, right? Is it just you want to work on something new and exciting, or does this actually bring business value? And I had to, you know, really think about that and jot it down, put together a chart, if you will, on the benefits that this would bring to change. Now, given that, that's not enough. Like, as Cam was saying, like, I can't just present a slide deck and everybody be on board. I started small, as Amber said, and did like a POC. And then I could have some data points, right? So it's no longer just a gut feeling of me thinking that this is the right direction. Now I have the data to back that up. Like, okay, our tests are running faster, or whatever that is that you're trying to accomplish there. And I started really small with like me and a couple of other people on a very small project. And then, just like Cam said, I did a meeting. Now, my meeting, I knew that it would be like Cameron. If I tried to set up a testing meeting and ask everybody to come, nobody would come. So instead, I asked, can I get on the agenda for the town hall where I know everyone is going to be? And I say, I have some exciting data. We're doing some really cool things on XYZ team that, I think the company would like to know about. And so, in doing that and sharing this data and sharing like how excited I was about the results, you started seeing other teams wanting to adopt this as well. So that's what happened, and that worked out pretty well. So you have to be very strategic in this. No one likes change. As much as we pretend that we're okay with it, people don't really like change. So you have to do it gradually, and you have to make sure that your motives are correct. All right. Adia, are there any other questions?
Yeah, there are a lot of questions. I'm just going to interject for a second. Some of the panelists mentioned the ultra-fast grid, and we got some questions about that. So if you could take just a moment just to explain what it is, that would be great.
Okay. So the ultra-fast grid is a visual grid. It's a new way to do cross-platform testing, which is really exciting. I just actually recorded a video on YouTube. I'll make sure you all get that link in the stuff that we send out. But what it is a way to run your tests across however many configurations that you like to. So that includes different browsers, that includes different viewport sizes within those browsers. If you want to do like mobile views, that's also included. And it's called ultra fast because it literally is super fast to execute. So what happens is you write your test just one time. You don't have to write for all of the different configurations. Like I don't have to write for, mobile view versus web view, which is a pain because, the elements are different. There's, the alignments and things are different. So it's kind of a pain to write those flows. And not only that, the execution could take a while across all of the different configurations. But the worst part of it all is that the return on investment is really low, because most of the bugs that you see with cross-platform testing are actually visual bugs, right? They have to do with viewports sizes changing, and now your app is no longer appearing the way that you want it to. So the ultra fast grid would allow you to just write your test once, right? Let's say you're writing for Chrome, right, on a desktop, and you will call the grid when you're ready to do your verification points. And what the grid will do is grab the state of your application and then blast it across all of the configurations that you specify. So that's what makes it so fast, is because it doesn't have to execute all of the setup steps and everything. Let's say, for example, your scenario is that you want to create a new user, and then you have to create a profile. You have to give them these administrative privileges, and then they can get to a certain page in your application, and then it's time for the testing. Well, you do that once on the desktop, and then you call the ultra fast grid and say, basically verify this everywhere. And because it's grabbing that current state of your application, it doesn't have to execute all of those prerequisite steps again across all those devices. It just blasts that state on the devices, on the different configurations, and runs the test that way. So there have been quite a few developers who've tried it out and written blog posts. They're running like hundreds of UI tests in like 20 seconds, which is unheard of. So that's how it got its name of ultra fast grid.
Thank you for that. Our next question: has anyone on the panel ever considered crowdsourced testing for cross-browser and platform testing?
Yep. Karen here for mobile. We did do that at one point, and it worked for us for a period of time. But then what we've found is, because of the nature of our organization, right? So they're unable to actually test, let's say, home loan, unless they have specific people in that crowd, in the crowd, or crowd of testers that they have that are banking with us, right? So we've found success on that only on a specific level, right? So maybe, I guess you can argue, savings and transactional accounts and credit cards, they're probably the majority of our users are in there, but we do have a lot of people in our user base with a lot more accounts, right? So what and this is where, and majority of the reason why we're using them is for visual. And since we've adopted Apply tools, we've actually been able to eliminate that and saved us quite a bit of money. So the amount of tests that we have, which is like pretty much thousands, we've selected core tests around that, which is really the really meaty, important tests, and really high priority tests that we need to run. And we're pretty much just able to automate that and saved us quite a bit of money.
Great. Anyone else?
Yes, Theresa here. We, at a former employer, we did use a crowd testing provider. And what I found in that experience was that they created more churn for us than actual valuable feedback. And my understanding is, if you want to do this, you've got to do it with regular releases, not necessarily big bang releases where you have a big test environment where people can play in, and then they can raise stuff, and then they come back and they have conversations with you. It's almost like you have, if you want continuous feedback, my suggestion is use this, but continue with continuous delivery and have a small subset of crowd testers, people who already maybe understanding the application or maybe understand some of the language. So in my very extreme experience, I found it was far too much work, but I believe there's a nice middle ground where it can actually work.
Nice. Amrit, what are your thoughts on crowd testing?
Well, I would probably think that crowd testing might be, it depends on the case. Like if you need something short term, like you need something immediate and just get it done and get over it, then yep, probably you go ahead with crowd testing, get an application tested, and that's it, done and dusted. But if your application is evolving, and you have to run the test multiple times, you have to keep on checking. I would probably recommend writing visual tests and functional tests to keep the feedback loop and continuous delivery going, as Theresa mentioned.
Very nice. Great. Adi, any other questions?
Yeah, sure. So we have a very relevant and up-to-date question. In our COVID-19 very uncertain and fluctuating times, and as more companies shift left and have developers do automation, companies seem to look at QA automation developers first when they're looking to lighten their IT team overhead. I myself lost my job a couple of weeks ago. My job was deemed not necessary or unimportant. How do we change how automation is perceived and how to make it as important as the other jobs on the delivery team?
Theresa here. I might just grab that. For me, this is a double-edged question. What I'd like to say is that you have to diversify your skills and not just automate. And I'm not sure who mentioned it earlier, but it may have been Amrit or Cam. It was actually Cameron who mentioned that the testers in his team do multiple skills. So they do exploratory testing, they do automation, they have a whole range of skills. For me, this is probably where you can start, but I don't want to say that being an automated tester or automation tester is necessarily a bad thing. You would need to, also to the earlier point, actually, really good point about your brand, where Angie was talking about going to the town hall and telling people what she was doing. It really is a branding issue as well. So we might need to mention what it is that we do continuously to make the value known and noticed. But I would say always diversify and always be ready to do a new thing if you need to. That's hard lessons I've learned in life. I've lost my job a few times too. I know what it feels like and I empathize with you.
Mm. Yeah, I'm so sorry to hear about you losing your job. It's a difficult and disheartening task to try to convince a company that what you do is of value. I found a while ago that I just don't want to do that. I just don't want to spend that type of energy at work, right? So when I seek out employment, I make sure that the culture is already there where they appreciate and they realize that this is critical, because it is critical. Like all of the companies that I spoke with, like I mentioned, the very first research thing was, 100% of them were doing test automation. They realized that this was a key enabler for them to be able to have confidence in their products and to be able to deliver at the speed that they desire to do so. And if you are working at a place that doesn't realize that, or that's maybe it's valid that it's not a key component of their business model, then that's fine. Like it's an uphill battle to try to change that culture in that way. And I personally don't want to spend the energy on that, right? So while it is very unfortunate that you did lose that position, I encourage you in your job search to seek out places that already kind of have their acts together as far as culture for quality. Anyone else had any points on this one?
Hey, I mean, so Tabcorp is an interesting company through COVID. I mean, like pretty much everyone in the world, it's been significantly impacted by COVID. I mean, we're a big gambling company, and the fact of the matter is a lot of sports have now stopped. The venues are now closed. So that means you can't go into a venue, play Keno, have a drink, do a bit of gambling. That's naturally impacted our revenue significantly, and we have had to stand people down, which is terrible and devastating. The last few weeks and months for me have been particularly devastating because as part of some of those bigger discussions, there has been talk of, do we need to get rid of some of the QAs? And that's for a variety of reasons, not because of the work at all, more just literally cost cutting. If a business unit's not making money, the business has to find a way to cut costs. I'm happy to say this, and it's come from weeks of effort as well, that our QA practice hasn't been impacted as yet. So we haven't lost any team members out of the team of 20. But a big part of that was the fact that we had so much behind us, and it's exactly echoing what Theresa said, that constantly showing what you're doing, the reason you're there, but also being flexible. And I'm going to use myself as an example, as I think I'm the best person to use for this in our team. You know, I'm the QA practice lead. Usually my role is to be across 24 projects, jumping on the tools, getting in on the actual work, doing some automation, going to the meetings, rallying people to new innovative causes and initiatives. But right now, the fact of the matter is, you know, we've got enforced annual leave right now. So a lot of our team members are taking forced annual leave. We're effectively in a kind of a slower motion at the moment until we come out of this pandemic. Because of that, it doesn't make sense for me personally to be going across 24 projects and pushing with the team as hard as I usually am to try and get all these crazy cool new initiatives for test automation across the line. So I've had to be flexible through this time. I've reined back a lot of that passion and excitement across projects and actually put it straight into Keno. And I'm actually working hand in hand with Leon and Aswin on the tools, on the cards, day in, day out to get us through this tough time and work with the team. I'm still holding on to a lot of those great initiatives and making sure they're still on track, but needless to say, we've reined it back a lot until we get out of the pandemic. But I just want to echo that for everyone in here. You know, you've got to be flexible at all times, and definitely be open to trying new things, constantly learning. That's why I'm a massive proponent of conferences and courses and all those sorts of things, because we need to stay on top of it. We need to constantly be building up ourselves, and we need to be open to new experiences as well, whether it be, you know, doing more dev, doing more automation, doing more manual testing if need be, even if that's not the thing we're most passionate about. Angie?
Thank you, Cam. Dee, any more questions?
Yeah, so we do have more questions, but unfortunately, we are getting to the end of the session. So just before I turn it over to Cameron to summarize and finalize, I do want to thank him and Testing Talks for partnering with us on this very special session, and of course to thank all our attendees and our panelists. So thank you, and Cameron, over to you.
Cameron, you there?
Hey guys. Yeah, so thanks so much, obviously, for coming along. This was so much fun. I really hope everyone enjoyed it and actually got something from it. A big part of what we're about, both Apply Tools and Testing Talks, is, you know, making sure people have actual practical takeaways, something they can actually take back to the office and use the next day. So we hope you got something like that from this. To also wrap up though, I want to provide the results to the Testing Talks online game, which a lot of people got involved in. We had over 75 people play the game. I'm going to tell you a story about that. I actually developed it on Sunday. So it was a bit of a last minute. I really wanted to have something fun for people to actually play. So I spent 12 hours coding that from scratch in the Testing Talks website using Ruby. And I panicked so much because I knew we'd have over 100, 150 testers in this webinar that would test it. And if they found any bugs, the first thing I'd get is a message saying, we've got a bug on your survey game. So I haven't had anyone tell me they got any bugs. I spent 12 hours coding it, and I added 24 automation tests, but we got there, and we got 2 great winners. So Saeed, Sabah, Hassan, absolutely killed it. 11 out of 11. Congratulations. I'll reach out after this webinar for your contact details, and we'll send you through that $200 Amazon gift card. Thanks to Apply Tools. Absolutely amazing. And then second, we got Nidhi Sashan. Killed it as well. 11 out of 11. Congratulations. We'll be giving you the wireless Bluetooth speaker thanks to Headspin, who, by the way, just an extra thanks to Headspin for coming on board as a gold partner. They're really cool. Definitely check out their website, what they're all about. Definitely recommend their products. That's it from me. Obviously, a massive thanks to the panelists. They're all incredible, and they're completely aligned with what we want in a webinar, which is, you know, actual testers working on the tools, working as testers every single day. They actually understand what we're going through as speakers. You're not going to see any salespeople speaking in our webinars, that's for sure.